All right, we are going to factor the expression 25x squared plus 81. So the way that we do this is we take the square roots of all the parts and pieces. So the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 81 is 9. Now, because this is plus here in the middle, right here, that means that we are going to make this a 9i. So it's a plus, and then the exact same thing, and a minus 9i. That will look like letter choice B. Now, the reason that we do that is because we want it to become a positive 81, and 9 times negative 9 is going to be a negative 81. But remember, when we multiply I times I, we get an I squared. We know I squared is a negative 1, so that makes it a positive 81. So that's the rationale behind it, in case you needed that. Okay, so on number 22, we have to solve this. We can solve it by factoring. So if you remember factoring, we're looking for things that multiply to give us 10, but add up to give us 7. Everything is positive, so 1 and 10, or 2 and 5. That gives us x plus 2 times x plus 5 is equal to 0. Then we would set each factor equal to 0 by the zero product property. And so I subtract 2 and I get x equals negative 2, and this would be negative 5. So I could solve it that way. That would be by hand, or we can always use Desmos and plug it into Desmos. I've got 2 ways to plug it in. If you remember, you could just plug it in x squared plus 7x plus 10, and we're looking for where it crosses the x-axis, which is, by chance, negative 5 and negative 2, which is what we came up with the other way. So we know that works. We could also type it in exactly as it is written there, x squared plus 7x plus 10 equals 0, and that's going to produce a different graph. So math, give me just a little second, and I'll show you the magic here. Bam, there you go. So the other option here is if we just plug it in exactly as it's written, you can see that it draws a vertical line through the points negative 5 and negative 2, which are by chance our solution. Not by chance, I mean, that's math. That's exactly what happens. When it equals 0, I get this solution. So again, it would be x equals negative 5 or negative 2. We can do all of our quadratics the same way with those graphs. It will make it a little bit more difficult sometimes if we're asked to find a solution that is a fraction, because Desmos will not graph it in a fraction, it'll graph it in a decimal. So if it's not a fraction that you already know the decimal representation of, it'll be a lot harder for you to find the solution. So let's try another. All right, number 23, we can do the same way. I can plug it straight up into Desmos. If I plug it into Desmos, I end up with this graph right here, and it shows that it draws 2 vertical lines, 1 through 6 and 1 through 7. So this would be x equals 6 or x equals 7. You could also solve this by hand. We would have to make it equal 0, so it would be x squared minus 13x plus 42 equals 0. We would factor things that multiply to give me 42 but add up to give me negative 13, so everything's going to be negative 1 and 42, negative 2 and negative 21, 3, and I'm doing these in my head, negative 3 and negative 14, 4 doesn't go, 5 doesn't go, negative 6 and negative 7, hey, there it is, negative 13, so that gives me x minus, not 3's under, x minus 6 and x minus 7 equals 0, so x is equal to 6 or 7, which, hey, we got the same answer that way as well. So this one worked out the same way. You could also graph this equation and get the same graph, or you could graph just the left-hand side and look for where it crosses the x-axis. So lots of ways to do the one single problem. All right, number 25, you can go the whole negative b over 2a stuff that we have done in the past. So you could say that we know that b is 2 and a is 1. So negative 2 over 2 times 1 means that we would get negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. So we know the x value has to be negative 1. So that eliminates b. And then we plug it in. So f of -1, so that's -1 squared, plus 2 times -1 minus 1. So that's 1 minus 2 minus 1, which is -2. So we would pick A. Now the other thing we can do is we can Desmos it. We can graph this equation and see what the vertex is. We should be able to tap right on it. So let's do that as well. All right, you can see when we graph it, remember the vertex is the lowest point on our graph. So our vertex is here, and guess what? It's at -1, -2. So you could do it that way too. Just plug it in and graph it and find out what the lowest point or the highest point of the graph is, and that would be your solution. So it says use the discriminant, but we can always do this in two ways. We can do it with a discriminant, or we can look at the graph and see how many times it crosses the x-axis. If it crosses 2 times, that's going to be 2 real rational roots. If it touches once and bounces, that's going to be 1 real rational root. And if it doesn't touch at all, so 0 times, then that's going to be 2 complex roots. So you can just graph it and see. The other thing we can do, which is use the discriminant, is that b squared minus 4ac, part of the quadratic formula. So a, b, and c are right here, so we're just going to plug it in. So -5 squared minus 4 times 2 times -3. And I'm not going to bother doing that in my head. I'm going to type that in my calculator. So I plug all that in, and I get 49. So that tells me that it is 2 rational roots. So if this discriminant is bigger than 0, then we would say that it is 2 real roots. If it is equal to 0, we would say 1, and it is less than 0. Go the other way. Hello. There we go. If the discriminant is less than 0, then we would say that it is 2 complex roots. I think graphing it is probably easier, but that's just me. And the beast of them all. This is the guy you've got to use the quadratic formula for. Dun, dun, dun. So let's quad formula this up. So remember, our quadratic formula is, this for you, Sebastian, x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we got to know what a, b, and c are. A here is 1. B is 5, and C is 3. So we're going to plug that in. So -5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 3. It's nice, everything is positive. All over 2 times 1. Now again, I'm not going to try to do that in my head. I'm going to do that on Desmos. I'm not going to copy it in here for you though. So 5 squared is 25, 13. All over 2. So it's plus or minus, it's -5 plus or minus the square root of 13 all over 2. Bam. And you are done. That is page whatever we're on now, 4, I believe, and I'll upload these to YouTube for you.